Now I'd like to open this meeting to the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Craig.
Thank you for those very timely and helpful readings. I think humility really blessed me this week. Whenever you don't know what to do, God does always know what to do. And I was out, and it seemed like something was upstairs in my house. My wife called, told me so. And I prayed, and I knew that, I felt it couldn't have been much. But when I got home, she told me that we had a squirrel in the house. And I don't really know how to get rid of a squirrel, but it's fine, out of the house. But I didn't want to keep it there, or to have a sleep in there while somebody's around. So I prayed, and God had a way. But I also remembered Mrs. Eddy's hymn 208. The last verse says, "No snare, no fowler, no pestilence or pain." And that stayed with me. And so I knew it wasn't right, and it wasn't it's not supposed to stay. So I trusted God and went back to my home office. And after some time working, the little squirrel, I'll be quick, came to the door and looked at me kindly. And I looked back, but it was peaceful. It didn't look like it was harmless. So I walked out, and I opened the door and gave it a little encouragement, and it just calmly trotted out. I happily trotted out. To me, it meant something, and my wife reminded me that we've always been gentle to animals in the neighborhood, and that squirrel probably knew so, and it felt love from us too. We throw bread and things outside for animals, but God removed properly what wasn't right, and it gave me peace. But I wouldn't have prayed if I realized that I couldn't do it by myself. I thank God for the humility we learn here.
Thank you. Shahi from Maryland, go ahead.
About a year ago, I got a dog. While I told the rescue group I wanted a low-energy dog that would be content just running around the backyard, I was introduced to and subsequently fell in love with the active terrier mix that needed long daily walks for his sanity and mine. After exhausting all the streets in our small neighborhood, I started looking for longer walking trails. Fortunately, about a mile away, there was a reservoir with a flat walking trail that both the dog and I would enjoy. However, to get to that reservoir entailed crossing a bridge over the reservoir. And I drive over that bridge almost daily. However, the first day that the dog and I tried to walk across it, I got so worked up with anxiety that I ended up falling in the street. So once I got up, we turned back and walked home. The following weekend, we tried to walk again, but as we approached the bridge, I could feel the anxiety build up once. So once again, we turned back and walked a different path, rather than run the risk of falling again. Since then, we would drive the half a mile to the trail rather than attempt to walk over the bridge. It didn't feel right to give it such an unnatural fear, and I was sure that I would shake it off eventually, but it just never seemed to happen, and avoidance became my MO instead. But earlier this year, I had a friend down from Philly come stay with me for the weekend. And on our Saturday morning walk, I was getting ready to drive us to the trail when she said that if the goal is to walk the dog, then why are we driving to a walking trail? I was ashamed to tell her about that little bridge that had become such a bugaboo to me that I agreed to walk to the trail instead. But as we got closer to the bridge, she could sense I was physically tensing up, so I finally admitted that I was scared of crossing this bridge. With her arm on our mind, we did safely cross the bridge, and I thought, yes, I had finally beaten this fear. But the following weekend, after my friend had gone home, the dog and I tried to cross the bridge, and once again, the anxiety and fear was so great that we had to turn back and go home. And at that point, I resolved to get some help to resolve this, to get this bridge to the curb once and for all. So I contacted a practitioner, and one of the first things she told me was, all that God art I am. When I thought about this, about all that God art, and as the image and likeness of God, I inherently have those good qualities as well, none of which included fear. So while working with this practitioner, we still avoided crossing the bridge and instead discovered all the other walking paths and bridges in our community and avoided this one. But finally, one day, the weather was so beautiful that walking trail was simply beckoning us to come, so we headed there. And as we got closer, the anxiety once again started to build up, but this time I refused to turn back and instead repeated out loud that God is my strength, and we soldiered forward. So we did cross the bridge, although I opted to walk in the road while the dog was on the sidewalk to be as far from the edge of the bridge as possible, but we did make it safely across. On the way back, I started to think again about how I am all that God art, which does not include fear. And this time, the both of us walked across the bridge on the sidewalk and even paused in the middle to look down over the bridge, and there was absolutely nothing to fear. The next day, which was Sunday morning, we once again walked the path and crossed the bridge safely to prove that this was not a fluke, but I'd actually conquered this fear. And I just want to say how grateful I am for independent Christian Science as it's taught here at Plainfield, and I'm very, very grateful for the practitioner that's helped me conquer this fear and for the excellent help she's provided me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chardell from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you, first of all, for tonight's service of music, beautiful readings, and just knowing you are all there. Tonight, I would like to offer my gratitude to the early workers and healers of Christian Science, many of whom met and knew Mrs. Eddy. Their love for Mrs. Eddy and contribution to healing all over the world has given a new understanding of how precious Christian Science is and made me more faithful to God, Christ Jesus, Mrs. Eddy, and our own Plainfield Church. Many of the early workers had severe physical issues until they found Christian Science. One gentleman witnessed his wife's healing, and simply by reading Science and Health with key to the scriptures, had a wonderful healing himself. We must not lose sight of the importance of the work and dedication that has gone on before us that brought healing to the world, and now it is our job to continue on with watches, work, services, prayers, and technical outreach that bring healing to our nation and all mankind. Thank you.
Thank you. LuAnn from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so deeply grateful to God for enabling me to build my pottery shop because of everything that it represents. To me, it stands as a testament to the healing power of the Christ, truth, and love as taught in Christian Science and the infinite possibilities of divine mind. Before calling a practitioner from this church, I was attending mental health therapy on a regular basis. I was diagnosed with PTSD and dissociative identity disorder, which they told me was incurable. I had been in and out of mental institutions for years. They gave me every brand of medication they could give me to combat my symptoms, but nothing ever changed. I had difficulty sleeping because of nightmares. I was suicidal. I couldn't stand up for myself because I felt like such a failure. I was full of hate and anger because of the trauma of childhood abuse. I could not manage my life or even begin to hope that my desire to help others would be a possibility. Continuous help and support from my practitioner enabled me to overcome and be healed from this debilitating diagnosis that was consuming me and keeping me from fulfilling God's purpose. At first, I was reluctant to trust and was not sure if I would survive the heat of baptism, but over time and several needed rebukes, I learned to be humble and put God first. Gradually gaining understanding, I stopped taking medication of any kind and learned to stand porter at the door of thought, using the truths I had been given to establish in thought my true identity as a child of God. With her help, I learned to stand up for myself and take control of the money God was providing me with to build the shop. In doing so, my relationship improved. As I endeavored to understand all that was given, I was healed of a spinal injury, which enabled me to finish the building with ease. Through persistence and an ever-growing love for God, I was brought out of the mental darkness and am now running a business where I can share the talents God has given me as a means of helping others in need. It's been 4 years since the foundation has been poured and my education in God began. I'm also grateful for Mary Baker Eddy and my practitioner for all the work that has been done to free me from ignorance and educate me to the Bible and the practical use of its lessons, enabling me to go forward, leaving the past behind. God, with all his infinite wisdom and mercy, has made all things new. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I am grateful tonight for how Christian Science is giving me the tools to put the past behind me by understanding that it was not the truth, but just false perception. Growing up, my mother and I did not get along. Much of the time, it was like we spoke different languages. A lot of junk over the years really put a wedge between us, and I spent most of my 20s and early 30s not talking to her. When I first came to Christian Science, I heard the term Father, Mother, God, and thought, I'll just concentrate on the Father part, because even though in the last few months of her life we did speak and we worked to repair the relationship, I still thought of the term Mother as kind of a bad word. But now with these past few years at this church, learning about what Christian Science really means, I've been able to start going over these past events and relationships with the goal of seeing them correctly. And this has proved quite a healing for me. It is shocking how much I was blind to before. Now I can see how, like everyone else, my mother was doing the best she could at the time, and I know that she continues to grow and learn with God. I also can now see how the mother portion of Father, Mother, God is definitely not a bad thing. It is the expression of love. What a joy that God loves in this manner. I'm so grateful to God, Christ Jesus, Mary Baker Eddy, this church, and my practitioner for all that has been done to create this change in me. I obviously couldn't do it on my own. What a constant blessing it is to be a member at this church, because every week there is always so much to be gained from Christian Science. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for this beautiful service. I am grateful for the recent healing of cold symptoms. One day I was hoarse in my voice, so I asked for prayers from the Plainfield practitioner. She reminded me my voice was to be used for praising God. This was really meaningful to me because, especially in the past, I have been pretty careless in what comes out of my mouth. I appreciate all I am learning here that's giving me a deeper sense of how to praise God. And I see it began when I started getting a newer understanding of our God. Because of limited use of my voice, I became more conscious of why I was talking and appreciating even more the importance that of all that you do and say for the glory of God. A prayer that's attributed to Mary Baker Eddy, which I like to turn to, is the following quote: Divine Mind, God, unfolds to me each day all I should know, do, or say, end quote. And another quote, give me grace to remain silent when it's not necessary to speak, end quote. Both of these come from Watch's Prayers and Argument, compiled by Gilbert Carpenter. I was also very grateful for testimonies one evening that I heard, especially one of a testifier who had been healed of chronic colds. The practitioner also reminded me to read an article called Contagion and I've Got Cold by Mary Baker Eddy, which can be found on this website. 2 days into the cold, the symptoms became worse, and I was concerned because there was a serious contagious disease going on in the room I was working. So I brought that up to the practitioner. I took time off that day to be quiet with God, which she encouraged because she was helping me understand that I need to stop pushing myself. And I was not to allow the pressure at work to dictate what I needed to do. Through the prayers of this practitioner, the symptoms cleared up in a few hours that day and disappeared, did not return. I am deeply grateful for this healing and all the good work that's going on in this church. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Bruce. I am very thankful for an article that's on our website on the front page called Rejoice Evermore, and it's given by Doris White Evans. Mrs. Evans was a teacher in our church, and what she gave was invaluable. Anyway, I was reading this article, and I couldn't help but notice that she explained when it said, pray without ceasing, it says, love to do right and do it. Well, I think if you look back in my history, whenever I had things to do, a lot of times I didn't love it very much. In fact, a lot of times I was getting down on myself about having to do it. But what came to me was a memory of several times when I had a chance to talk to Mrs. Evans, and I was told her one thing I was going to do, and the words that came out of her mouth were, okay, go to it. And it was so bright and so positive and full of love, I just felt this sense of love. And then I would do my project with this feeling in mind. So after reading her explanation of pray without ceasing means to just love what's doing, love to do right and to do it, is quite a blessing. And the blessing came back again this morning. Over at our house, we had a bit of a cleanup job. So I started cleaning up, and I just found myself just loving to do it. And I just had this wonderful sense of joy while I was cleaning up. Something needed to be cleaned up. So I'm so thankful for Christian Science, from the instruction from Mrs. Evans, and this article that we have that she authored, because this whole idea of loving to do right and to do it has been a valuable blessing for me, and it helped reverse a lot of error and not let it come back. And that is definitely a blessing. Thank you. Karen from Kansas, go ahead.
On Election Day, I was reading the article, The United States of America, by Bignell Young. It was so comforting to know that God had chosen the United States as the birthplace of Christian Science. I went to bed at 11:30, conscious of this wonderful article. I was completely comforted and unafraid. Thank you for the readings and for the music and for the testimonies.
Thank you. Mike from New York, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the beautiful service, for the wonderful testimonies that have been given and the ones yet to come. Last Tuesday were a couple of events in my area. There was an election and there was a fire from an old steel factory several blocks long, now converted to other uses. The human sense the smell from the fire was unbearable, and the election left a bad taste. I'm most grateful to have Christian Science to hold me up under circumstances that in the past would have left me feeling depressed and hopeless. When I walked out of the house in the afternoon, it smelled like someone was burning plastic. A neighbor informed me that a factory had burned, and it was about 20 miles away. I felt sorry for the people living closer and went on with my own self-centered thoughts, figuring that wind and whim would take care of the situation. On Friday, going to feed the horses early in the morning, there was again that overpowering smell. And I thought, this is not caused by God, so why haven't I been working on this? If God didn't create this, then it is unreal, and God's truth and principle will annihilate everything unlike it. So easy, and have heard it in so many discussions and testimonies here at Plainfield, so it shouldn't have taken 4 days to figure that out. Then thought of hymn number 144, the atmosphere of love divine we live and move and breathe. I started working with that. I was so grateful to overcome the stupefying effect of mortal mind of leaving this to chance, and went right to work on it. Never got another whiff of that smell, even though I had to drive through the immediate area, again, where shortly before my only thought to deal with it was to leave my windows and my mind rolled up. I'm so grateful for this healing. I realized that this hymn applied to the election also. There was a lot of mental atmosphere that needs purifying. I'm so grateful to have come through the election calmly thanks to the teachings here at Plainfield, how to watch and pray to bring about the only rightful government of God, even as I had to help others around me uplift their thought, in spite of their oppositions to my commitment to Christian Science. I know that through God all things are possible after the fire smell disappeared. God did it, and I don't have to know the details. Past having been involved trying to change things for the better through government entities of the material nature, to have the goal of regulating everything honestly and fairly, I knew how depressing things can feel when there seems to be no hope and no solution. Major reason I stuck with Christian Science is from the failure of my material efforts to fix things, and an unwillingness to give up combating injustice. As a foreign-born child, new to this country, my first language foreign, I was bullied and fearful. So fearful that when called a Nazi as an insult, I didn't correct things by admitting that I was of Jewish descent, because the only other Jewish family in town suffered even more abuse, but unlike me had the courage not to hide. I'm now so grateful for this experience, even though you couldn't have convinced me back then that it wasn't better to be like everyone else. That gives me the incentive to speak on behalf of people with lesser voice when necessary. The only place I have to hide now is to be hid with Christ in God. That's from Colossians 3. I'm so grateful for practitioner help and the teachings here at Plainfield that are enabling me to do this with less animosity and more of God's love and grace, because that is truly the only healing of the nation. Revelation 22. I'm so grateful to God for giving us Christian Science, Christ Jesus, and Mary Baker Eddy to show and teach us the way to harmony.
Thank you. Tom from New York, go ahead.
Hello, and thank you very much. Last week, I was on a call. Also later, I got rather testy with some people, and I thought about that later, and I thought, you're seeing many minds, and you're not understanding who's really governing things. So actually, it kind of took me a couple of days to think that through. I was reminded of something that I'd read a long time ago, but it's from the prophet Habakkuk. He says that, just paraphrasing, if I don't have any food, I will rejoice in the Lord. And he said, if everything's going wrong, I will still rejoice in the Lord, because, those things that are going wrong or the lack of food is not true. So even though maybe things aren't being done the way I think they should be, I know that we're all governed by one God. And if I do believe that, then I'm not going to have the feeling of anger inside me. So, and I learned a lot of this from this church and the wonderful people here at this church. And I just love this church. And I love the way people volunteer and how you can call in on Wednesday night and not listen to silence. It's just fantastic the way everybody participates. So very grateful for this church, and thank you.
Thank you. Lil.
I was remembering a wonderful healing I had a while back. I had been picking up a few pieces of trash from a curb and putting them in a trash can. On my way back to my car, I suddenly tripped and fell on the sidewalk. I immediately declared God good and that I never fell out of God's love. I got right up. My hand was a little scraped and my ribs were sore. I kept my thought on God and that He loves and cares for me and that I couldn't be punished for doing good. Coughing did hurt, but I kept knowing that I was God's perfect child. In a couple of days, all was well. I'm so grateful for Christian Science, for learning to persist in the truth that I'm God's perfect idea. I thank God. And I'm grateful to be a part of this church where I've learned all this wonderful good. And thank you for the wonderful readings.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Tonight I'll just like to give thanks to God for learning to keep calm and poised as we've been taught here throughout all the times when there seems to be such busyness and rushing. Already I see the shops, people, so many people there, so many rushing around, and the holiday season's coming up. I remember when I used to get caught up in this and a lot of anxiety set in. This is years ago. But to turn to God even in the midst of all that has helped me so much. And I'm just so grateful for that discipline of always turning to God wherever I am. And it brings that calm that helps me through everything. And I'm sure as we all learn in here that discipline of thought is just so important for everything. It helps us when any challenge is coming up. But I'm remembering just how I used to feel during this time of the year, and I wanted to share this tonight and hope that it will bless someone. I'm so grateful for that gathering tonight. Thank you so much, Fairly, for the beautiful readings and the message that it sends. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
From our church bulletin board, Georgia. Thank you to all who have worked so diligently on the Plainfield Independent newsletter. I enjoy every aspect of it. It has humor, information, and many inspiring articles. The article on praying without ceasing in the June edition is a particular favorite. Thank you again to Carol and Jim and all who have contributed. And then Pennsylvania. This is a quote from Mrs. Eddy about politics from Mary Baker Eddy's Lessons of the Seventh Day. Quote, avoid being identified pro or con in politics. If you do otherwise, it will hinder our cause. Remember this. Keep out of the reach of such subjects. Give all your attention to the moral and spiritual status of the race. God alone is capable of government. You are not. I am not. But God has governed through his anointed and appointed, one in the way of divine science, not politics, nor the making or breaking of national laws or institution. He, God alone, is capable of this. End quote. And then an email from Washington State. I'll just read the ending of it, where he says, I grow ever more grateful for my Plainfield Church family. It was truly the leading of the kindly light that never fades or fails. Thank you all for the healing work you are doing. And then a letter from California. Dear friends, thank you for all the loving, strong work you do for God, Christian Science, and the Plainfield Church. I have long time seen this Plainfield Church as a beacon of light, sending out the Christ truth to the world. Very grateful for the services, publications, website, forum, roundtable, and Bible studies, and for the Plainfield practitioners who teach and heal. Enclosed is my monthly contribution. And then an email from Virginia. I am very grateful for the most recent Bible study. Thank you for sharing the research about the apostles Stephen and Paul, how Stephen's humble, God-loving attitude enabled him to see Jesus and led him higher out of that horrible experience, and touched Paul and led into his life ministry. Thanks for sharing how every job done for church blesses the community and helps someone, and that includes the most humble taking out of the trash with a humble, loving attitude. Thank you for the website full of timely articles, songs, and readings. I'm grateful particularly today for Carol's readings from Martha Wilcox and Gary's readings of Mrs. Eddy's article on age. It's awesome all that you accomplish and provide here to bless the world. And then also an email from someone who has visited us at the church a few times from Pennsylvania. He said it was a pleasure to see everyone, and that he's been listening to our audio on the website, in particular, Mrs. Eddy's One Cause and Effect from Miscellaneous Writings. He also enjoyed our service, hearing the scientific statement of being read Sunday morning was inspiring. Thank you and everyone for all the work that is being done. I too am very grateful tonight for those wonderful healings on humility, the beautiful music, and to hear everyone's testimony of praise. In the lesson this week, Psalm 42, it says, "Yet the Lord will command his loving kindness in the daytime, and in the night his song shall be with me, and my prayer unto the God of my life." I've had many healings in Christian Science, and one was of insomnia, and I remember reading that passage in Psalms and being so greatly comforted, the thought that God gives us songs in the night. And around that time I found an article. It was in an old journal, and it was called Songs of the Night. It was written by a Nell Flash, and this article was in a more recent July 2015, Love is the Liberator. Anyway, she starts that article with, "Sometimes during the darkness and silence of a long night, the clear, sweet song of a nightingale may be heard. If we could imitate this little bird and remember to sing songs of praise to God, this would help quiet our fears and bring us peace. For God giveth songs in the night." My trouble with insomnia was partly due to being such a worrywart, but I can remember thinking about this article and thinking about the fact God does give us songs in the night, and I would sing hymns to myself and go over all that I was grateful for. And I found that such a comfort, and I would usually fall peacefully asleep. A practitioner in the church also instructed me, if I ever was having a restless night, to pray, not just for myself, but to pray for our church, our community, nation, and world. Whatever was coming to me of a troublesome nature, to pray about. And once I established in my mind that God is all, and all is in his hands, again, I would fall peacefully to sleep. I'm so grateful for the practical uses of Christian Science. It never fails to heal whatever our problem is. The end of that article ends with a quote from Mrs. Eddy, where she says in Science and Health, "A louder song, sweeter than has ever before reached high heavens, now rises clearer and nearer to the great heart of Christ. For the accuser is not there, and love sends forth her primal and everlasting strain."
Thank you.